Folks, I want you to think about something. An Iranian drone hits an oil tanker near the Strait of Hormuz, and the United States military launches strikes on Iran in response. CENTCOM, missiles in the air, targets in Iran. We are talking about the most strategically important waterway on planet Earth. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read that this morning, and I have this story right here in my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, I sat back in the Attila the Hun chair and I thought, this is what we're talking about today. Not the Yankees, not the guacamole recipes. This, the Strait of Hormuz. You know what goes through that stretch of water? About 20% of the world's oil supply every single day. That little sliver of ocean between Iran and Oman, it is the jugular vein of the global economy. And Iran just took a swing at it, and America hit back. Now, is this going to be the beginning of something bigger? Is the ceasefire holding? Is it not? We are going to get into all of it. Plus, AOC wants to break up Apple, because of course she does. We'll talk about that. A French lawmaker is celebrating the demographic replacement of her own people, out loud, on the record, and the American press has barely noticed. And the Democrats, the Democrats are in full panic mode as the socialists take over their party. Bill Clinton is out there telling everybody everything is fine, which, coming from Slick Willie, should terrify every Democrat in America. I'm Rick LeBeau, this is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. All right, my friends, let's talk about Iran, and let's talk about what is actually happening out there in the Persian Gulf, because I think a lot of people are confused, and understandably so. The drive-by media covers this story the way they cover everything, with maximum drama when it suits their narrative, and near total silence when it doesn't. So let me try to lay this out for you in plain English. Here is what we know. An Iranian drone struck a Panama-flagged oil tanker near the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. Central Command, CENTCOM, responded with strikes on multiple targets inside Iran. And this comes on the heels of what's been described as a ceasefire agreement that apparently Iran decided was more of a suggestion than a commitment. Trump has now threatened further action after what is being called the second ceasefire violation. Now, let me just pause here for a second. Iran hit a commercial oil tanker with a drone near the most important shipping lane in the world. And somehow, somewhere, there is a person, probably someone with a journalism degree from a very expensive school, who is going to write a piece about how America is the provocateur here. I guarantee it. I have been doing this long enough. Don't doubt me, because that is always the move, isn't it? Iran shoots, Iran mines, Iran drones, Iran funds proxies who blow up our soldiers. And at every single step of the way, there is a chorus of voices in Washington and in the prestige media who say, well, but what did we do to make them feel this way? What did we do? Let me tell you something, folks. Iran has been at war with us since 1979. That is not an exaggeration. That is just the plain, unvarnished historical record. The hostage crisis, the Beirut barracks bombing, funded by Tehran, decades of proxy attacks on American soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan, arming the Houthis who have been shooting at American ships, and now this. The mullahs in Tehran, and by the way, I want to be very clear, I'm talking about the regime, the revolutionary government, not the Iranian people, who I think largely would love to be rid of these characters. Those mullahs have been playing the same game for 47 years. Push, see what happens. Push again. Back off when it gets hot. Wait, push again. And for a long time, American foreign policy essentially went along with this game. We'd fire off a strongly worded statement. We'd impose a sanction that had more holes in it than a screen door on a submarine. We'd refer the matter to the United Nations, which is about as useful as referring your mugging to the neighborhood watch. Actually, that's an insult to the neighborhood watch. But here's what's interesting about where we are right now. CENTCOM launched actual strikes on targets inside Iran. That is not nothing. That is a signal that the rules of engagement have changed. And when Trump says there will be consequences for a ceasefire violation, well, history suggests the Iranians have some reason to take that more seriously than they took the previous 3 administrations' red lines. Now, I want to use a little analogy here because I think it helps. Imagine you have a neighbor, and this neighbor, for as long as you can remember, has been sending his kids to throw rocks at your windows every few months, window after window. And every time you go over to talk to him about it, you end up apologizing for the way your house looks or offering to move your driveway. That's been American foreign policy toward Iran since the late 70s. What's different now is somebody finally walked across the street and knocked on the door, hard. The question, and this is the real question, folks, is what comes next? Because there are 2 possible outcomes here. One is that Iran recalibrates, decides that the risk-reward calculation on poking the bear has changed, and actually honors the terms of whatever agreement has been reached. 2 is that the regime, which is ideologically committed to projecting strength because its domestic legitimacy depends on it, escalates further. And if they escalate further, and this is the part the drive-by media is not going to want to talk about, they escalate further not because they're strong. They escalate because they are weak. The Iranian economy is a disaster. The population is restless. The revolutionary regime rules through fear and foreign adventurism. It's the oldest trick in the book. When the people at home are miserable, you give them an external enemy. You give them a reason to be proud. You fire a drone at a tanker and tell the folks in Tehran that the great Satan is on its heels. That is the game. That has always been the game. And every time an American administration signals weakness, every time we draw a red line and then quietly redraw it slightly further back, we give the mullahs exactly what they need. We hand them a propaganda win. We extend their shelf life. So when CENTCOM launches strikes, when there are actual consequences, when the cost-benefit analysis for Iran starts to look different, that is not warmongering. That is the only language this particular regime has ever understood. Now, I don't want to be Pollyanna about this either. War is a serious thing. I am not sitting here in the Excellence in Podcasting studio throwing my hat in the air and saying, let's go get 'em. I've lived long enough and read enough history to know that wars are easy to start and very hard to finish. And the Gulf region is one of those places where a miscalculation can cascade in ways nobody planned for. But I'll tell you this, the alternative, the years and years of Iran doing whatever they want while American presidents sent sternly worded letters, that wasn't peace. That was an invitation. Every accommodation we extended, they interpreted as permission for the next provocation. You want to know why the Strait of Hormuz matters so much? Set aside the oil numbers for a second. The Strait of Hormuz is a demonstration to the entire world, to China, to Russia, to every small-time despotism with big ambitions, of whether or not America actually controls its sphere of influence. If an Iranian drone can hit a commercial tanker in that waterway without a meaningful response, we have just told every adversary we have that American deterrence is a bluff. That is what is at stake here. Not just one ship, not just one drone. The credibility of American power in the most combustible region on Earth. And that, my friends, is why this story, above all the stories in today's briefing, is the one that deserves your full attention. Not the Yankees, not the guacamole. Not whatever Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said on Twitter before lunch. The world is watching what happens next. The mullahs are watching, and if we get this right, if the cost of messing with American interests goes up sharply and stays up, we might just get through this without something far worse. If we get it wrong, well, let's not get it wrong. All right, the roundup. Let's move, let's move, let's move. First up, and honestly, this one is too good to pass up, a far-left member of the French Parliament stood up and essentially celebrated the demographic decline of native white French people. Gloated about it, actually. You lost! You lost, she apparently said, referring to the native French population being replaced by immigrant groups. Now, I want to be very careful here, because the moment you discuss this topic, the drive-by media immediately starts calling you names. But let me ask you a simple question. If a far-right politician anywhere in the Western world stood up and said the same thing, you lost, directed at any other group of people, at any other ethnic or demographic population, what would happen? We all know what would happen. It would be the story for 6 weeks. There would be emergency sessions. There would be CNN specials. There would be think pieces and hot takes and pearl clutching from every corner of the establishment press. But a left-wing French lawmaker gloats about the displacement of her own country's native population, and it barely registers, because it fits the narrative. This is what I call the coalition of the oppressed at work, folks. The left has constructed a moral hierarchy in which certain groups can be discussed, criticized, and frankly celebrated over as they decline, and other groups are off limits from even the mildest observation. Pick a group, make sure they're on the approved list, and you can say absolutely anything. Pick the wrong group and you're finished. France has a serious question to answer about what kind of country it wants to be 50 years from now. That is a democratic question. It is a legitimate question. And when elected officials start openly celebrating a particular answer to that question, not debating it, not reasoning through it, but gloating, something has gone badly wrong. The French people, by the way, have repeatedly shown at the ballot box that they have concerns about this. Their political class has repeatedly ignored them. Sound familiar? All right. Item 2. The Democrats are in a full panic over their socialist problem. Candidates backed by New York City's socialist mayor, a fellow by the name of Zoran Mamdani, won key New York primary races. And now the more moderate Democrats, the ones who still think they can win a general election, are waking up to what those of us on the right have been saying for years. The socialists aren't coming for the Democrat Party. They're already there. And into this situation walks William Jefferson Clinton, who assures everybody that Democrats are in great shape for the midterms. That's right, Slick Willie himself, the man who triangulated his way through the 90s, is out there telling the base to relax, which, I'm sorry, is hilarious. Bill Clinton telling the modern Democratic Party everything is fine is like the captain of the Titanic telling passengers it's just a little water. The man hasn't been relevant to Democratic politics since his wife lost to Barack Obama in 2008. But there he is. Everything is fine. The socialists winning primaries is fine. Nothing to see here, folks. The truth is that the Democrats are going through exactly what a lot of people predicted was inevitable once they spent a decade telling their base that capitalism is the enemy, that America is fundamentally corrupt, that the system needs to be torn down. You spend 10 years marinating your voters in that worldview. You should not be surprised when those voters start nominating people who actually believe it. The moderate Democrats created this monster. They fed it, they flattered it, they refused to draw any lines because they needed those votes. And now the monster is hungry and it wants to run things. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the moderates on this one. You made your bed, friends. Now, third item, and this is a local story, but I think it illustrates something important. New York City's socialist mayor, there's that name again, Mamdani, apparently ordered the NYPD back in March to stop criminally enforcing against reckless e-bike riders. And the New York Post is pointing out that people have been getting seriously hurt because of it. People getting run down on sidewalks, people getting hit in crosswalks. Now, why would a mayor tell police to stop enforcing against reckless e-bike riders? Well, they'll tell you it's about fairness, about not targeting minority delivery workers. That's the stated rationale. But here's the thing. If your fairness policy means that pedestrians are getting mowed down on the sidewalk, at what point does the fairness concern flip? What about fairness for the 72-year-old woman trying to cross the street? What about her? This is the problem with a lot of progressive governance, folks. They pick a sympathetic group. They build a policy around not inconveniencing that group, and everyone who gets hurt by that policy is just collateral damage, acceptable losses, not the right kind of victims. The all-knowing, all-sensing, all-seeing Maha Ricky has been watching this playbook for decades, and it never changes. The only thing that changes is which group gets the protection and which group gets mowed down on the sidewalk. All right, my friends, we are coming up on the end of the program, and I want to leave you with a few thoughts as you head out into your Sunday. We talked today about Iran, about strikes, about the Strait of Hormuz, and I think the big takeaway, the one I want you to carry with you, is that American strength is not provocative. The people who tell you that American strength provokes conflict have it exactly backwards. American weakness provokes conflict. American strength prevents it. Every time we have pulled back, apologized, accommodated, sent letters, lifted sanctions in exchange for promises, the world got more dangerous, not less. The historical record on this is not ambiguous. And what you are seeing right now is an attempt, imperfect, messy as all real-world foreign policy is, to reassert that the cost of attacking American interests is higher than any adversary wants to pay. That is the right instinct. That is how you keep wars from getting bigger. Pray for the men and women out there doing the hard work in very dangerous places. Would you? They deserve that at minimum. On the domestic front, the socialist takeover of the Democratic Party, the French lawmaker celebrating demographic replacement, the e-bike mayor telling cops to stand down, it all comes from the same place. The belief that the traditional order of things, whether that's the nation state, whether that's the rule of law, whether that's just the common sense idea that you don't ride your bike full speed through a crowd of pedestrians, the belief that all of that has to be dismantled in favor of some revolutionary new arrangement, that is the project. And the American people, God bless them, keep pushing back on it. They push back at the ballot box. They push back in their communities. They push back every time they turn off CNN and look out the window and notice that the world the drive-by media is describing doesn't look much like the one they're actually living in. The American people are, as I have always maintained, the only adults left in the room, and I trust them. I always have. I'm Rick LeBow. This has been Rush Hour, same time tomorrow, if they let us back on.